Hello and welcome everyone to the Movement Made Better podcast. I'm Dennis.
Ray.
And I'm Neal.
Nice. How's it going, guys? How was your weekend? Even though we're in the middle of towards the end of the week because we haven't seen each other. It's Thursday versus Monday.
It's all blurred, man. It's just busy.
Just busy?
Busy weekends.
Busy?
Kids around.
I went to Austin.
Oh, you went to Austin?
Weekend.
Oh, did you? Oh, yeah. So how's that?
oh.
That was your first time. Oh, that was your first time. We talked about barbecue.
Yeah.
Sorry, we talked about. Okay,
Terry
so.
Blacks. Oh my.
Okay,
God.
so you went to
So I went
Black's
to Terry Blacks.
barbecue.
That was
Okay.
really good. Everything there was perfect. Wouldn't change a damn thing.
No, yeah.
Beef rib was good. Was amazing. The brisket was amazing. The jalapeno cheddar sausage was amazing. And then their coleslaw was actually perfect.
Really?
Wouldn't change a thing about it. Nobody gives a shit about coleslaw.
I
But
make a
theirs-
good coleslaw.
There's
I like
this
coleslaw.
really
Really?
good. And then I went to Salt Lick Barbecue. That
Okay.
spot was pretty good. The
Okay.
only reason I went there was for their bison ribs. And that was the first time I've ever had it.
Bison ribs.
That's what I said. That was a deciding factor.
Okay, so how are those different than the beef ribs?
So the bison ribs, it's hard to say because I got the beef ribs there too. And theirs
Okay.
is different than Terry's.
Terry, yeah.
But the bison rib, there was like a small bone in it, and that was it. But the rest was just muscle meat. There was some rendered fat. There was still a little bit of connective tissue, but they smoked theirs very well, so it was all a very good texture. It's
Yeah.
a little leaner typically, yeah.
Okay.
But theirs was really good. The texture was really good. The bark was really nice on it. The flavor was awesome.
Any gaminess, like a
No.
different flavor profile, the
I
same
didn't
flavor
get that.
profile?
I didn't get that,
Okay.
and I was actually eating the beef and bison ribs
And
back
so
to
back
back.
to back. So
And I actually preferred the bison ribs more than the beef ribs there. Because their beef ribs were a little bit tougher. I like mine to be a little bit more tender.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
their
yeah,
smoke wasn't there as much.
Oh.
So I didn't enjoy it as much, but it was still good.
Were you impressed at the size of the beef ribs?
Dude, you were right,
Dude,
man.
was I lying, bro?
Oh, man. So that one rib I got from Terry's was like 1.26 pounds.
Dude, I told you, bro.
Dang.
Dude,
That was just one rib. And I was
one
like,
rib.
I probably should have
Just
got a
one
second
rib.
one, but it was a big ass rib.
like you went if you go to Austin and let's
So
like
one
one rib,
one
right?
bone.
One
Okay,
bone.
so here's the difference. If you're in San Diego, you go to Phil's Barbecue, right? And Phil's is probably one of the better places outside of Texas to get beef ribs. But even when you go to Phil's and you see their beef rib, like you'll get a 3 beef, they do like a 3 beef rib and a 6 beef rib dinner. The 3 beef ribs are good size, but together they're about the size of one of the ribs that you'll get at Terry Black's or La Barbecue or any other places. That's the size difference. So I don't know what they're doing to their cows size wise, but man, it's Fred Flintstone.
Oh, yeah.
It totally is. It's like you can hear the music playing in the background
Yeah.
while they deliver the rib, and you're just waiting for the table to tip over, type of thing, right?
Yeah. I think there I got like, that was the very first place I ate at. And I got like a little over 2.25 pounds of barbecue. That was it. And then when I went to Salt Lake, it was over 2 pounds as well. It was good. I went to this place. It was the only barbecue spot I didn't go to when I was out there, but it was called Bird Biscuit. And they have like fried chicken in a biscuit, and their biscuits, the best.
Really?
Best I've had. They come with a honey butter, like some kind of a honey sauce.
Oh,
So it had a super slight kick for the non-spicy one.
okay.
But the flavors, the texture of the biscuit, buttery, it was
Oh.
so good.
I'll have
So
to put
good.
that on my agenda because I'll be there in November, so I'll make sure I get that. I get to there.
Oh, yeah. I'm going back for sure.
But yeah, because you need to get La Barbecue, so you got to compare the two.
It was actually
gotta
between La Barbecue and
yeah. Oh, the other place. Oh, it's between.
Salt Lake and La
Oh,
Barbecue.
so Salt Lake is between those two locations.
Well, no, I just picked between those two.
Oh, between the.
only
Oh,
reason
gotcha,
I went to
gotcha,
Salt Lake
okay.
was because of bison rib.
Oh,
that
that's
was it.
Big difference.
That was it.
I'll have to check that out though. I've never had a bison rib, so
It was
I would be
good,
curious
man.
to check that out. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I was in Toronto for a workshop, so that was pretty cool. That was my first time, especially going up in Buffalo. Going to Toronto was not a big deal, but that was my first time in almost 30 years since I've been to Toronto.
Has
Yeah.
it changed quite a bit?
No, it was about the same. I guess talking to Mark Liebert, because Mark Liebert, the creator of the Equalizers, was hosting the workshop. We're actually going to talk to him about possibly being a distributor for us north of the border. So that's nice. So for all of our Canadian listeners who are interested, to be continued. Hopefully that'll be taking place. So that'll save you guys a lot of money and make sticks more accessible up north.
Yeah.
We went downtown. Yeah, he said other than traffic has gotten a little bit more people kind of moved into the Toronto area. Toronto is, for the people who don't know, that's like the city in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's the New York City financial hub, fashion hub, all that stuff. But no, we had a great time. And yeah, the city, we were driving around and trying to think back to what I remember 30 years ago. But other than a lot more building around the outskirts that wasn't there 30 years ago, yeah, that was probably the only different thing. So, but no, it was a good time, and the weather was nice. About 50 degrees during the day, low 50s. It was nice.
Okay.
You know me, I dig that.
Yeah.
Shorts, t-shirt weather. We were out Saturday night. People were kind of bundled up, and I was like, "Wow, you guys, this is nice weather."
Yeah, you would think they'd be used
bundling
to
up yet? Yeah. It's funny because even if you grow up into it, there's a lot of people that don't get used to it. Even if you grow up with it, right? For me, cold is like Wim Hof talks about, right? You can learn to regulate that, and you can learn to change your perspective on heat and cold, right? For me, cold has always been more mental than physical, right? So, for me, it's mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So it's that type of thing.
Can you do that with 110 though?
I've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
I have. And I still don't like it. It's not like you were with me in Vegas. I was like, what the is this shit? Yeah. Because it was 115 when we were in Vegas.
115.
117.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't enjoy it. It's not like I'm like, woohoo, let me get out there. But it's like, you learn to tolerate it, But, especially like if you go over the Middle East and you're going to be there for a week, well, you better learn to tolerate it because this is the temperatures you're going to be in, right? Yeah. But at the same time, that's why there's so many malls over there because that's where people hang out. They just go there for the air conditioning. Oh, yeah. But Mark and I were talking about how, we need those differences in temperature because we got to condition ourselves, right? Systemically, we need those changes. And sometimes as a society, we've gotten really comfortable with being comfortable.
Oh, because we got AC units and stuff.
Heating units, we can regulate that, right? So, but it is kind of funny when you get people that are really accustomed to being in a controlled atmosphere. When they get out of those temperatures, their reaction, right? Yeah. It's harder for them to deal with those.
Well, living here too, I mean, we don't get a big variance.
You don't get a much
temperature, right?
Like if you want, you go to Tahoe, right?
Yeah.
You go to Tahoe.
Yeah.
Like I can go to the temperature and then come back, and then I can, so you can control where we're seeing that. For me, it's one of the downsides of living out here is because you don't really get that contrast as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so well, we're gonna pick up continuation from our last episode. Last episode we talked about internal hip rotation. So this week we're going to talk about the benefits and importance of external hip rotation. So what is one of the benefits of having good external hip rotation or optimal, so to speak?
Well, the way I look at that is mostly stability when doing like a deep hip flexion type of movement. So for a squat or a deadlift or something where you need to actually get the glutes to stabilize, that external, you have to have some access to external rotation in some way, shape, or form, but also to kind of feel your glutes. Because I feel like people that don't have really good external hip rotation, they kind of miss a little bit of that link to knowing what it feels like to get their glutes to fire, but also that hip position to get their glutes to fire a little bit better. Yeah. So that access to that external rotation kind of has a lot to do with from those two exercises. Outside of that, there's a lot more at play, but from the stability part, just working with that deep position, that's where I feel like it kind of is important.
So you're talking about that corkscrewing that we tell people to do to really get into that deep hip rotators and stabilizers, glutes activation when we're pushing weight away from the floor, essentially.
Absolutely.
Which is a big key for people that don't train. They miss out on that, right? So when you get somebody that has, chronically injured themselves when lifting objects off the ground or pushing objects away from the floor, that's kind of one of the main factors that they're missing out on is just that subtle cueing, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Well, we talked a lot about internal rotation, but equally important is external rotation. Whether or not we work on it as much, I don't work on external rotation as much, but overall our hip has to rotate. Mm-hmm. So we need to have that ability to do all of it if we want a healthy hip.
Yeah, because it's a ball and socket. So maybe sometimes people don't think about what the joint actually is in and of itself, right? So it is that ball and socket. So when you have a ball and a socket, it should have lots of movement skill set, right? It should. It's kind of interesting to see how limited some people's femoral head is in there. I mean, it just, you see people that don't have internal, external rotation. So you're sitting there envisioning this ball and socket that just doesn't move. It just sits there. You're like, oh my God. Yeah. That can prevent you from just something as simple as getting on the floor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which we know is with a lot of the aging population is a big issue for them is getting up and down off the floor. But just thinking of external rotation, just simple going up and down stairs and how that affects that process, or getting in and out of your car.
Yeah.
There's a task that we do, most people do on a regular daily basis multiple times, right? That can also dictate which way you're better at externally rotating, because if all you do is drive your car, well, then your left leg, for us here in the US, left leg is going to be externally rotated. If you're in the UK, then it's going to be the other side. But if you're a passenger most of the time, then of course your right leg is going to externally rotate a lot more than your left leg. So yeah, getting people comfortable being able to sit on the floor and get up and off the floor with that external rotation is a big key principle for general population, big time.
You know, I have a friend who he used to drive like 10 hours a day for work.
Steve.
Yeah,
Steve, yeah.
And his right foot was just basically stuck like that. Because he would just, he'd get so relaxed.
Boom.
Open up his hip, open up his foot.
But he's strengthening because he's pushing down on the accelerator.
Micro levels of tension.
Right?
But it was stuck like that.
Yeah. And it's funny because you talk about that, and I mentioned that before, where when some people stand, you can tell if they drive a lot, that leg at passive rest just stays open, right?
When we think about like a dancer's posture, right?
They're externally rotate because they're taught
like duck feet, right?
Yeah.
So they're kind of stuck like that. Although most dancers, because they train so much, do have access to both internal, external rotation. Their standing posture ends up being out that
they're
way.
used to, right? And then of course the form police come along and go, well, we can fix that. And you're like, well, I don't know. Watch them dance.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's not a lot that needs to be fixed. They move a lot better than we do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what they're going to be to fix. This lady just did a friggin' triple axel, and I think she's good.
Yeah.
I don't hear her complaining about it. I think we just leave her alone or that guy alone. They're pretty doing okay.
Yeah.
But from a lifting standpoint, it's external rotation has a different role than from a movement standpoint, so to speak, right? With the external rotation, you talked about you don't train that as much.
I don't.
Intentionally, just that specific movement as opposed to internal. And I'm the same way.
Yeah.
But you train external a lot more.
Yeah, because I do a lot of squat, deadlift, or movements that are kind of similar, or bilateral movements. And so for me, like, it's more important I feel like it's important for me to train it, not just from the aspect of like, are my glutes actually firing? Because I use it as a little bit of a test. And even sitting in a 90-90, if my front knee is off the floor, okay, so I'm tight here. So I need to find out what's going on and work on manipulating that. Because what I notice is and I see this with clients too, is that if they're missing external rotation on one side versus the other, it immediately goes into their lower back. And so if there's that lack of access to that external rotation, or even just specifically from the stability standpoint, then now we're losing tension in certain areas. So now we're getting up that chain into the back where we don't want to be at. So for me, since I do lift a lot, my training around external rotation is a little bit higher, maybe than the average, maybe even more than I necessarily need.
Yeah.
But I don't look at it as it's not something I don't need access to, mainly because of what I do. It has to be there. And I think it's important to be there. But that aspect of how well can I control it for that particular day, that's what mostly comes into play. I don't worry about the strength aspect of the external rotation.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
The control aspect of how well can I control and manipulate my hip in certain positions or certain degrees of hip flexion.
Yeah.
As soon as you're coming up beyond 90 degrees, all of a sudden that control kind of becomes a little bit more challenging for a lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah, we see that when we teach a course. As soon as we get people above that 90 degrees of hip flexion, that's when we get the ooh and the ah reactions when we're doing our drills, because people be like, oh my God, that's not something they typically work.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when one of my favorite drills is when we're getting people to abduct and adduct simultaneously with external and internal rotation. But you'll see that especially when somebody doesn't have external rotation, is they're abducting out or adducting in and then trying to externally rotate. That's when you get the, oh my God, reaction, because they're like, I haven't really worked this before.
Yeah. And and even like in relation to like the hip flexor tissues, that complex, they do work in hip flexion, but also external rotation, kind of like the psoas
they're all tied in.
All tied in. So if you're missing external rotation, more than likely you're having some kind of leak in power or leak in control in one of those areas.
Yeah, because we tend to try to isolate too many movements specifically, but everything is just
It's integrated.
Yeah.
tied in together, right? So the thing about it, if you don't have external rotation and you don't have the ability to turn that femur outward, the effect through that posterior side up to into the spine, like you talked about, but that inability to really help move the pelvis around,
Yes.
or stabilize the pelvis, because it's whatever you need at the specific moment, right?
Yeah.
People tend to get locked in on, I really want to stabilize or I really want to mobilize, and you're like, "No, you got to be both."
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are like, we tend to go from one side or the other, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, no, you got to find that balance of know when to stabilize the pelvis, but know when to move the pelvis at the same time, so that the spine and the QLs especially aren't getting overstimulated, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think through the drills that we do, like the stick taps and then just getting in the 90-90 for me, those are kind of my checks.
Yeah.
So it's not that I don't train external rotation at all. It's more of like, hey, if I still feel really good with these, I don't really need to emphasize it as much. So I'll still load it here and there. Like I'll do every now and then I'll do some weighted pigeons, things like that.
Okay.
But it's the ratio of training internal to external is probably like 2 or 3 to 1.
But so, okay, but let's take that from a golfing standpoint, because we have so many people that golf. What is more crucial for a golfer, internal or external?
Rotation.
Right, so that's a big deal, right? So that's a big thing for
Yeah.
versus somebody doing a lot of squatting and deadlifting, where external is the more crucial quality, right?
Yeah.
But in climbing, which we like to do a lot, external rotation is very important, because if you can't open your hips up on the wall,
Right.
you can't get as close to the wall as you can.
Yeah,
So if there's a point where I ever lose that, or I feel like I lose that strength, then it's like, okay, I need to go back and I need to work on this so it's not doesn't mess up my technique on the wall.
yeah, and also when we have to stem
Mm-hmm.
and really drive out, that's where you'll realize, oh damn,
Yeah.
like I don't have that strength in external rotation, which I've experienced before, right?
Yeah.
That's stemming is now fun.
Yeah.
Like I love stemming. That's when you got to push out there. That's like oh yeah, I kind of look forward to that,
Yeah.
because I can do it now. Whereas before it's kind of like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you step up on the wall, like you're in full hip external rotation,
Yeah,
deep hip and knee flexion, and then you have to drive up off that leg.
yeah.
So
So
maybe I do train it more, just
but
because of
you
fun.
do, but
Yeah.
you're actually applying the
Activity
training.
as opposed
It's
to-
not, but yeah, you're not intentionally sitting down
Yeah.
and focusing on a specific external hip rotation drill,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? So that's the difference there.
And then you get it from hockey.
Yeah. But that's for me. That's why I train the internal more, right? And my external on my left leg is much better than on my right, because when I go up over the boards, when I'm getting off the ice, my left leg is what comes up high into flexion, and then I throw it out over the board. So my left external hip rotation is vastly better than my right,
Right.
because I'm also, once my leg goes up there, up on top of the board, I'm actually pushing down on it too to help lever me over the boards.
Okay.
That's the downside of being 5'3". There's a shitty downside to that. So yeah. Whereas somebody that's like 6'6", they would just step over the board.
Yeah.
And me, literally, I'm like, throw and then push. Yeah. So I got that. And then, so I'm kind of trying to launch myself over the board when I get off the ice. Because I'm trying to do it quickly, too.
Right.
So I got a teammate coming on, and I can't be on the ice. Like, I got to get my ass off. So it's boom, boom.
Makes sense. So a question I got is, do you think it's important to train external rotation for someone who has tight adductors? Do you feel like it's something that could potentially benefit it? Or do you think that's something that's not really important for that?
I would say, yeah, because you got to think about, why do they have tight adductors, right? I mean, we look at lines of push and pull.
Yes.
If one thing is dominating, one thing is inhibited, then we get that sense of tightness, right? And so we got first of all, see, okay, is it lack of range of motion in the adductors, right? Is this an actual short thing, or is this more of a neuromuscular thing? I think that's the first thing we got to ask ourselves before we go stretching somebody's adductors, right? Oh, let's stretch those. Okay, do they need to be stretched?
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
If we put our legs up on the wall and we hold one leg and we let one leg go out to the side, how much abduction does it have? How much range of motion does it have? Is it 15, 20 degrees? Okay, we got to open that up. Is it way out there, but you still feel that sense of tightness? Well, then maybe it's something else, right?
Yeah.
Is it that external rotation demand that you're not getting?
Mm-hmm.
And so your midline is trying to pick up that slack, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to think here. With that one there, it would, if they can't sit on the ground,
Mhm.
yes,
Okay.
for sure. Then I would, train the hell out of that.
Yeah.
So they could sit on the ground. But sometimes I've seen people overuse their adductors. Like, let's just say we're doing split squats,
Yeah.
but they're set up in a position of external rotation. So then they have to use their adductors.
Mhm.
They can't use their glutes because they can't get into that internal rotation position. So they're already stuck in it, external rotation. So every time they drive off that front leg, it's like, oh, my adductors are killing me.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because you're in that position. Now, if you squared yourself up, you probably wouldn't feel that quite as much.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, to look at if their adductors are tight, I think I'd have to be like in the butterfly or straddle or something like that.
If that's the case, what's one of your favorite positions then to retrain that to get that inhibited side to kind of turn back on, so to speak? If the internal rotation was over dominant, so to speak.
Oh,
Or if you're always in external, I should say.
First, see if you can just square up.
The hips, right?
Square the hips up that way.
Because a lot of times they don't know that
They just
they're
don't
not
know.
square,
It's just positional.
Yeah. True.
right?
True.
Yeah.
You'll see some people stand and their hips are rotated.
Yeah.
They just don't know it because they don't have this body awareness to understand their hips are rotated. They don't get it. You're like, turn your hips to the right, and they still turn. It's kind of funny when you see somebody in rotation, let's say hypothetically to the left, right?
Yeah.
And you'll say, oh, turn your hips to the right. How many times they actually turn it farther to the left?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, no, your other right. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But then a lot of times they don't turn the hips. They'll turn the thoracic spine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
That connection with that area of their body is just not there.
Because every time we get people down in the 90-90 in our classes, we typically see them bias external rotation.
Yeah.
So that's where you see it right away, right there, just in that 90 or the half kneeling setup, not the 90-90.
Yeah.
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 You see them open up because that's where they have much more stability.
Stability.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right from there, you can tell right away, like, hey, we need to train more internal rotation with
Right.
this person.
But that, like you were saying, though, it does carry over to the 90-90 because we typically get way more reaction from people on the internally rotated side.
for sure.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's for me personally, too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like,
Me too.
yeah,
Mhm.
when I'm in the 90-90, my internal side is the one that's talking to me way before my external.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, damn. Like, oh.
It's lighting up.
It's lighting up.
Yeah.
But, for me, if there's a moment where I'm starting to get a little creaky in the low back, when I really work on driving that internal rotation a little bit more,
Mhm.
that to me is just more of a reminder of, hey, maybe you've skipped a session or two of not doing this, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I'll be like, oh shit, I'll get in there and all of a sudden just
Mhm.
kind of lets go. So you're like, ah. So yeah, it's a big benefit of making sure that you're kind of balancing both, but it depends on really what you're looking activity
Yeah.
you're trying to do, right?
I mean, ideally, man, you have equal range of motion, equal strength in both sides.
Yeah.
That's a perfect world right there.
But everybody's
Yeah.
asymmetrical, and
For sure.
and that's normal. But I always kind of wondered too, like, because with certain drills, like a good example, hip airplanes.
Yeah.
I'll have clients do hip airplanes. Even as them getting into that RDO position, they're immediately in that externally rotated position.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, no, I want you to correct your hip. I want you to turn that hip down. And they're like, oh, the movement is confusing to them because they're like, I feel like I'm even. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Here's a picture. This is what you look like. And they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't look like how it's supposed to. And so as soon as they kind of drop that hip in, getting that little bit more internal hip rotation, that's when they're like, oh,
Yeah. There's
okay.
one
Yeah,
Yeah, there's your glute because we'll hear that. We'll be like, oh, and we cue that like when you turn this hip down, you're going to feel that increased tension on the opposing glute. Like, you're going to feel that. That should be your automatic response.
Mhm.
And that when you feel that, that's when you know you're in a good spot.
Yes.
Right.
Even sometimes a connection to the hamstring sometimes.
Yeah, we heard that too. Yeah.
Because where people just lose that connection to the hamstring because their default position is dumping that hip outward.
Right? Or like when you have someone, you tell somebody to internally rotate the hip and they drop and they turn it once again.
Yes.
How many times do you see them turn the spine?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, no, that's not your hip.
Yeah.
Your hip's down here. Turn this, not upstream.
Yes.
But their brain's like, well, it's easier for me to do this. I'll just turn my spine.
Yeah.
It gives me the same sensation positionally in space. But you're like, no, you can't in an airplane, our objective is to open up the hip and close the hip.
Yes.
But you can't open what's already open.
Right.
If it's already open, well, then we're already there.
Yeah.
We got to teach you to close it so we can teach you how to control that opening and closing of that hip rotation. Do you find that people that when they get into RDL and they're already open, do you find that when they close it, when you get them to close that, when they turn their head, that base leg just goes way more ballistic?
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
I say typically, yes. Because automatically their sensory input of balance goes out the window because they're so used to defaulting to their outside foot. Typically, then that's the other thing too, that shift in weight of your foot changes as soon as you start to kind of close the hip.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, I feel so unstable. It's like, yeah, because you utilize getting that foot to stay arched and active, but utilizing that midline or that medial aspect of your foot as well. So that big toe pressure too. That immediately goes out.
And it's funny because you'll see the dancing.
Yeah.
Or the little, like the big toes tapping. Because it's just trying to figure out what to do, right? And you'll see this up and down all the time.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, try to keep it in contact. Press it down, right? But yeah, if people don't have that sense of what their joints are doing, they don't know. So it's always amusing to me to see the physical reaction when people get into these positions that they're not specifically training or spending a decent amount of time training.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess by decent, I would say maybe even if you give yourself maybe 45 minutes a week towards it, I guess. Maybe something like that.
I think that's
Yeah, I try to get people to say, look, spend 10, 15 minutes, like 2-3 times a week.
That's
that's
great.
it. That's a great.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot more than you're doing now
Yes.
because it's a love-hate thing, right? I mean, you're going to hate it,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where as you feel progress, as the client feels progress, then they get more into, okay, I'm digging this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I can do it, right? And that's the key thing. Because once you get to learn how to do something and you know that you can achieve it, then it makes it more enjoyable. Because
everybody always strays away from the things they're not good at.
Yeah. Well, also, like, unless we're teaching, are we really doing 2 hours of isolated hip work a week?
No,
Absolutely not.
no. So coming back from Toronto, I think about how much time I spent on the plane. And when you're sitting, of course, boom, you're externally rotating out. Some guys, of course, get that really wide spread. And you're like, hey, man, we're on a plane. Close your shit together, dude. But yeah, so you're kind of doing this, right? But then when I got back home, Monday I had 2 games back-to-back Monday night. And then Sunday I had another game. So I played 3 games in 29 hours.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I was like, yesterday was one of those days where it was, okay, I sat on the ground. I literally did about a half hour worth of just recovery for the hips, T-spine, getting everything opened up. And then today will be my first day, like training.
Yeah.
So now it's going to be working once again. This will put more time into internal rotation. I'll probably spend about a good 10 minutes or so working on that before I start to get into other parts of my workout.
Yeah.
But yeah, I personally try to spend probably even on myself a good half hour to 45 minutes of just internal rotation.
Yeah. I feel like there's a certain amount of medium volume that you need per week for sure. And probably for the average person for internal rotation, they probably need a whole lot more. They need a whole lot more.
Yeah, I think they do.
Yeah. Because that external rotation, that's everybody's default. So of course it's super easy to train and people look forward to training it, but it's that internal rotation, that's where you need that restorative movement.
Uncomfortable too, man.
Yeah. It's never fun.
Yeah.
It's never fun.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But the nice thing is with training this thing, just even simple little tools can really help make training internal and external hip rotation a lot more effective, so to speak. So not only the sticks, but bands. Foam rollers work great.
Yeah.
And most people have a foam roller at their house. So a foam roller is a great tool. I mean, I love having people compress the roller with their adductors and then pull their foot away.
Yeah.
You can do a seated, like you're not going to go anywhere. You know, I love the supine, where you then push the roller towards your feet to get the front tissues activated a little bit more, and then do the same thing. Your spine's stable, so you're not loading the spine at all. It's stable. Now you can really focus on the hip flexor, internal hip rotator tie-in.
Yes.
And that's always good times. People love that one too.
Yeah.
The reaction is always great on that.
Oh, yeah. Everybody starts to cramp immediately.
Yeah.
But it's the safest position to train at internal rotation if somebody's not comfortable being in a seated position.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I have people who are missing internal rotation, I'll have them do it from a supine position.
Oh,
All of a sudden, there's no trying to sit upright and trying to make sure it's not upright, you're flexing, you're not moving. It's just simply just the hips.
Yeah.
So I find that's probably the best way to kind of isolate that particular movement pattern.
Because one of the other things I'll see when people try to train internal, like what we just talked about with the roller, moving the foot away into internal rotation, their torso will shift.
Yeah.
So if you get somebody that tries to compensate with shifting of the leverage of the upper body, then take them to the floor to eliminate that.
Yes.
Now there's no need
change.
for the brain to sense stabilization because now you're stable. So that's another reason why if you see somebody doing that from a seated position, then take them to the floor to eliminate that compensation there.
So for external rotation, what's your top 2 exercises?
I love putting a block between feet, and then you got resistance bands around the knees, compressing the block with my feet, and then pulling my knees away from each other. So that one, that's one of my favorite, because then as you're pulling the knees away, depending on the band, so if you got really good mobility, then you're using a thicker, bigger resistance band. But then you have that ability to not only compress the block, but then as you're pulling the knees away, you can pull the block in towards you to really drive.
Yeah.
Because once again, you're just mimicking a seated position, but you're on your back, so you're fine torso-wise, right? Because we'll see some people will compensate when we're in a seated position. We're telling them to ask them to actively push out to the external rotation. Sometimes you'll see people kind of just leverage their torso into it, right? I'll just lean into it. You're like, no, I'm not looking for you to do that. I want to see you actively pull your hips out to the side.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite?
One of mine, actually, with the sticks, I'd say the abduction with external hip rotation. It's super hard, honestly. Like, no matter how much I practice it, for me, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But the reason why I like it is because there's more full body integration into it. So now we're not only getting the hip complex, but we're getting that lateral chain that's actually activate now. So for a lot of people where they don't have that connection of like, all right, now you're going to drop down, abduct, now start externally rotating from this position. The cool thing about that, or like a Captain Morgan, or a cool thing about that is that just you can put them at different hip positions. Yeah. So now it's not just at 90 degrees or higher. Now we can go a little bit below if someone doesn't have access to getting their hip that high.
Well, the Captain Morgan is nice too, because when you get it out there, when you add the lever lengthening, where we extend the knee, that's always super. Dude, that's always fun to watch people try to get into too, because they're like, "Oh my gosh, welcome to external hip rotation." Right? And they're like, "Oh Jesus." The pinning the ball, the physio ball on the wall,
That's a good one.
pinning it and then lifting it. That's one of my favorite new ones now too.
Yeah.
Love that one because that's a really good application of external rotation with the hip flexion. So that's one of my favorites too.
I really like the elevated pigeon on an incline bench.
Yeah,
so
great one.
Starting with sticks,
great one.
and then going through the full motion, but having someone actively, do the hinge, the full hinge, pushing into the bench, coming out of it, and then eventually take the sticks away, and then eventually load them.
Yeah. That's a great one too.
And then also a side plank with your knees bent and in hip flexion.
So actually, what I'll do is a side plank clamshell for people if they're missing external hip rotation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes,
yeah.
Glute fired up.
Yeah.
So that's another good one. That's actually probably like one of my favorite go-tos.
Yeah.
Just because it's super simple and oftentimes everybody can do it to some varying degree.
Yeah. Well, and a good exercise if you want to train both is you get into that hip flexion side plank, right, where you're talking about kind of clamshell, but you put a band around your feet or your thighs. So now you're training external on one side, internal on the top leg that's floating.
Yeah.
if you can hold that position, it's
hard.
really hard.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
Really hard. What are some non-gym specific things that you would encourage people to do that are going to really give them that ability to work both internal and external without them actually knowing that they are, so to speak? Like for me, hiking, it's like rock climbing, so to speak. Right? We know that for us, I think we all agree that's probably one of the top things you can do.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there's a lot of people that right now they're like, I'm not doing that.
99% of the listeners.
They're like, I'm not doing that, right? Even indoor, I'm not doing it because they're just not comfortable with being off the ground, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something we know. Like, a lot of people just aren't into that, right? If taking into account people that aren't going to go to a climbing gym, what is something that they could do that's going to give them the properties that we're talking about?
I mean, hiking for sure.
Hiking for sure.
But the terrain has to be...
It has to be challenging, though, right? And I think that's the thing of hiking that is, once again, an aspect of progressive overload, so to speak, right? You got to tell people, look, just go on an easy trail first. Light incline, light decline for a substantial amount of time. Get used to that. And then start thinking about, okay, more incline and then more of that really different terrain, so to speak, right? Versus getting kind of off a set trail, so to speak, versus kind of figuring a new trail out, you know? In areas where maybe are a little bit rockier, where you're going to have to gauge different steps, right? One step, you may be stepping up in 30 degrees of hip flexion. The very next step, you may be asked to bring that hip up into 110 degrees of hip flexion, that type of stuff.
Yeah. I think only thing I could think of off the top of my head is kind of like an omnidirectional step up. If someone's doing, let's say they're not going hiking.
Okay.
They're like, what do I have access to? Everybody has access to a step of some kind.
Yeah.
But if they're doing some kind of an omnidirectional, either in whatever direction, but typically going lateral. I'd say mostly going lateral, being comfortable with learning how to shift their weight into that hip and then kind of shifting back and forth. I feel like that would be probably a good way to kind of load external hip rotation, but also work on that stability factor.
Yeah, that would work too. I think not a lot of people are going to go do this, but go fencing.
Hey.
Oh,
And that's basically all external rotation all the time.
Maybe dancing.
Dancing would do that.
I think dancing is something that most humans are musically inclined at some level. Right, at some level. But yeah, get out of shit, even if it's in your own house where nobody sees you. You know, you don't have that confidence to go out in public and dance. Fuck it. You're in your own home.
Yeah.
Turn the music up. You know, I mean, I think we all did it as kids. I mean, I grew up in the MTV generation, so I sure as shit did that, right? You know, you're watching the videos and you're trying to mimic the same dance moves, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you moving your joints the way you should move your joints, right? And you're not even thinking about it because you're watching something or you're just grooving to the music.
Yeah.
I think that's something I always love encouraging people to get out and do a little more dancing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
What other?
I don't know. It's tough to think what other thing. Because I think other things you maybe need a combination of certain things, right? Like, do some swimming and then maybe play some tennis, right? You know, you got one that's supported, your weight is kind of supported by the water, but then you got another one, then you go a little bit more ballistic, a little more lateral movement that we're kind of missing out on. So I think you got to kind of find maybe 2 or 3 different things that maybe blend together and offset each other, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? One activity will give you these traits, but maybe misses out on these traits. But now this other activity will hit those other things, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like a lot of people, all I do is bike. Right? They'll be like, I'm a cyclist. Okay, well, let's
do something.
Get you off the bike. Not that the bike's not fine. Like, you love your biking, great. Now let's find some other stuff that's going to offset the biking, right? Like we want to accentuate, like we want to be a nice complement to that. But what are the things that you're not getting on the bike? And now let's find another activity that's going to give you those qualities.
Yeah.
It's almost like go build stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Or go do yard work because you get everything when you do that.
That's a good one. Yard work, gardening. That's a big activity. A lot of people, some people hire gardeners.
I think around here,
most people are hiring gardeners. But yeah, if you have the gumption and the wherewithal, and I should say the knowledge to tend your own garden, then yeah, that'd be a great activity. But I think those are things that people should start to think about. Okay, what are some things that I can do that are going to give me a nice blend of all sorts of stuff?
Well, the simplest thing, another thing that comes to mind is your kids.
Oh, yeah.
Play with your kids, man.
Yeah.
Just go do the same stuff that they do. Like, play around with them.
Oh, for sure.
Move with them. Kids get in quote unquote extreme positions all the time, but yeah, we probably can't do that as adults, but mimic them a little bit.
Yeah.
Play around with them, like, be on the ground, move around, just do different things, because you're going to hit all those same positions or get the same stimulus, at least, for some of those positions that we can't get through conventional exercise.
Yeah, man, running through some of these playgrounds, chasing the kids,
Fun as
and
hell.
you're like, I have to duck and run.
Well, yeah, you got Dr. Rod,
Yeah,
right?
but you see them go through these things, and you see them make these hard cuts.
Yeah.
Ooh, I can't make that hard of a cut, you know?
That's the benefit of youth and age,
Yeah.
youth over age, right? I mean, youth has it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's hoping that we can still keep that mindset as they get older. And we hope that, knowing what we know, our hope is for youngsters to continue to hold on to that perspective of movement and really fun.
Yes.
Right? It's about enjoying what you're doing, right?
Yeah. That's going to be fun as a parent, like just playing around with your kid.
Yeah,
Man, go to the playground, chase them around. Like, you guys remember the game Lava Monster?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Like you're just going around, moving in different ways, jumping on different things or whatever. If you can handle that kind of stuff or just really, really low impact versions of it, why not do it?
I know.
Yeah.
You're going to get your heart rate up, so you're going to get great amount of exercise. Your body's going to get a ton of stimulus, but it's an enjoyable process that doesn't feel like it's exercise. And I feel like that part is important.
And it truly is like unpredictable movement.
Absolutely.
It is unpredictable. Yeah. If you have someone that you come across that has habitual low back pain, but everything they're doing, we hear this all the time. I go to a chiropractor, I get adjusted all the time. Then I think for me personally, I'm always like, okay, well, fix the hips. What are your hips not doing? I think that's one of the biggest things that for people that have chronic back issues, Chubbs Peterson said it the best. It's all in the hips.
Yes.
Right? I mean, the man lost his hand to a crocodile. But yeah, so he's right. It's all in the hips. Not all in the hips, but it's a good amount of it's in the hips.
Yeah.
Then if your hips are stiff and they don't move, well, think about that chain effect upstream. So instead of targeting the symptom area all the time, think about what's taking place below that. Remember, that spine sits on top of your hips. So what are your hips not doing? So give your hips a little bit more mobility, a little bit usable range of motion, and see what happens upstream. That's just my personal piece of advice for people that have chronic back issues.
Yeah, that's my biggest focus for people too.
Absolutely. So,
yeah, which is a little different because I don't think a lot of when they come see us, they're not expecting that.
Yeah.
Like, I got to get my core better. And you're like, your hips are pretty crucial there.
Yeah.
But I hear the same thing. Yeah. My doctor said I got to strengthen my core. Okay. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Do the old nod and sure. Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
You tell your doctor we're going to fix that core right up. Let's get into the hips. Let's figure out what's going on here, or let's figure out what's not going on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because if we feel it in our own bodies and we do this for a living, I mean, then we think about what everybody else is going to feel that doesn't do what we do for a living and doesn't have the time to put in like we do. Any last thoughts on that? Any words, any sage advice on?
Oh, man. Train everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Train everything, man. Don't be afraid to train the uncomfortable, particularly the uncomfortable shit. Train that. Get decent or pretty good at that, then start doing all the stuff that you're good at.
Just always check in with all your joints. Like you gotta do like little mini assessments every day, and you'll come up with those. Like it could just be whether it's a hip car or doing the stick taps or something like that. You'll know. You should know. And then when your body tells you, "Ooh, that's not as easy as it used to be," go train it.
Go train it.
Yes.
Don't avoid it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a key thing there. Don't run away from your issues, because guess what? Those issues aren't going to go away. It's not like the issues are going to be like, oh, they're ignoring me. Okay,
Yeah.
so I won't have any effect on that person. That's not the way issues work, folks. Issues will just keep compounding and compounding and compounding.
Mhm.
And if you don't have joints that don't understand their roles, well, if you avoid it, they're only going to disconnect even farther.
Yeah.
Is that it's not going to resolve itself.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So find that balance. If you get something that you know you don't do very well, then take care of it. And if that's just a few minutes a day, then remember, you're not doing it for anybody else.
Mhm.
And that's what I always tell my clients. I'm like, do it for yourself. You're not doing it for me.
Mhm.
Don't do that work thinking, oh, Dennis told me I need to do this. No, you need to do that for you.
Mhm.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I get out of bed every morning. I'm good. Like, I'm not the one that need do this for you
Mhm.
and nobody else. Right. Well, thank you for joining us. And until next episode, be good to each other. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and whatever platform you're on, either Apple, iTunes, or Spotify, please, if you could leave a review, we'd appreciate that. If you have any questions that we can answer for you, be sure to leave those in the comments also.
If you're looking for more information on our education, our products, please go to www.stickmobility.com.
And also hit that subscribe button to that YouTube channel. And don't forget our live Instagram classes 3 times a week. If you want to join in, grab your sticks and hit that 45-minute class.